They say the human eye blinks 15 to 20 times a minute. That's nearly 20,000 times a day. Each blink lasts about 1/10 of a second. A tiny, insignificant fracture of darkness. We don't think about it. We don't feel it. It's a reflex so deeply embedded in the body's operating system that it happens below the level of consciousness, below will, below any ability to stop it. The world goes dark for 1/10 of a second and then returns, and we call that normal. We call that seeing. But in my house, that 1/10 of a second is a window. It's an invitation. My name is Mark, and I haven't slept in 72 hours. My eyelids feel like they are made of sandpaper and lead. My corneas are screaming, red-rimmed and raw, and producing tears I can't afford to let fall, because every time I try to clear them, every time I even think about blinking, I feel it. The shift in air pressure, the change in the weight of the room. I cannot close my eyes. Because 3 days ago, I realized that the thing in the corner of my living room isn't a shadow. It's a passenger. And every time I blink, it moves 3 feet closer. It doesn't walk. It doesn't crawl. It doesn't exist in the spaces between my blinks the way that normal things exist in darkness. It simply is further into my reality during the microsecond of my darkness. Each blink is a permission slip. Each blink is a step it doesn't have to take because I take it for it. Right now, as I speak this into my recorder, it is standing at the foot of my bed. I can feel the air displacement of its breath. If I blink now, it will be on top of me. And I can feel the twitch starting in my left eye. Whatever you do, don't look away, and for God's sake, don't blink. It started with a statue. I moved into the apartment 3 days ago. New city, new start. The specific optimism of someone who has decided that geographical change will accomplish what internal change has so far failed to do. The apartment was on the 4th floor of a pre-war building with high ceilings and original molding, and the kind of architectural confidence that modern buildings no longer bother with. I went to check the basement. Storage, the landlord had said. Previous tenant left some things. The flashlight found it before my eyes did. The beam caught the surface of it, a blackness so deep it seemed to eat the light rather than reflect it, and I moved the beam back and understood I was looking at a figure, hand carved, dense dark wood. Perhaps 2 feet tall. A smooth, featureless head tilted at a very specific angle. Not quite looking at you, not quite looking away. The angle of something that has been watching a door and has just registered a sound in the room behind it. No face, no eyes, no mouth. Just that smooth, egg-shaped surface and that particular tilt of attention. I thought, avant-garde. Previous tenant, art school type. I took it upstairs and put it on the mantel because the mantel was bare and the apartment was empty and even wrong. Art is better than vacancy. An hour later, I was in the kitchen. I looked back into the living room. The mantel was empty. The statue was on the floor, 5 feet from its original position, facing the kitchen door. I laughed. Uneven floor, subway vibrations. The building settling. Every rational explanation a person with a functional relationship to reality reaches for when reality first presents its first small irregularity. I moved it back, set it carefully in the center of the mantel. 5 minutes later, it was in the hallway. The cold sweat started then, the specific cold that doesn't come from temperature, that comes from the body's animal intelligence registering something the conscious mind is still refusing to process. I hadn't seen it move. I had been in the kitchen the whole time, the living room visible through the open doorway, the mantel in my peripheral sight, the entire 5 minutes. And then I understood. I blink, constantly, automatically, without thinking about it. 15 to 20 times a minute for the entirety of my waking life, I perform this small act of self-produced darkness and have never once thought to account for what might happen in those moments. I decided to test it. I sat in the chair facing the statue. I stared. No blinking. I held it until my eyes began to water, until the sting was sharp and specific, like needles pressed into the surface of the pupil. I held it for nearly a minute, my eyes pouring tears down my face, my vision blurring at the edges. And then my body did what bodies do. My eyelids fell. For 1/10 of a second, the world was dark. When it returned, the statue's smooth, faceless head was 2 inches from my face. I could smell it. Wet earth, stagnant water, something old and still and patient. The smell of something that has been waiting in the dark for a very long time and has finally found what it was waiting for. I threw it in the hallway closet, locked the door, braced a chair against the handle, went to the bathroom and stood over the sink, running cold water over my face, trying to rinse the smell out of my nostrils. I looked up into the mirror. The reflection wasn't right. It was the bathroom. It was me. But behind the reflected me, the reflected closet door was open. I turned around. The hallway was empty. The chair was against the door. The lock was turned. I blinked. The statue was in the bathroom doorway. It wasn't wood anymore. It was flesh. Pale gray flesh, the color of something that has never been exposed to light, stretched over a frame of rusted wire that showed through at the joints and the knuckles. No eyes, no mouth. Just that smooth oval head with its expectant tilt. And I understood, with the complete and immediate certainty of the body rather than the mind, that it was watching me. It was watching me through a sense I didn't have a name for, from behind a face that had no instruments for watching, and it was waiting for the next tenth of a second. I began the chemical campaign against my own nervous system. Caffeine, smelling salts, cold showers. And then, when these stopped working, the tape, clear medical tape, applied to the upper eyelid and fixed to the brow bone. The pain was significant. The skin around the eye is thin and well supplied with nerve endings, and the adhesive is not kind to it. But the tape held the lid up. The eye stayed open. And as long as the eye stayed open, the thing stayed where it was. I set up industrial work lights, 4 of them, on yellow tripods, 5,000 watts of combined output. I flooded every corner of the apartment with a white, clinical, shadow-killing light. Shadows are where it lives. Eliminate the shadows, eliminate the blink, and I could hold the line. The tape blasted until the tears stopped. Your eyes need moisture. Without it, the cornea begins to dry, begins to ulcerate, the world dissolving into white blur and red pain. And that is when I noticed the room had changed. Not dramatically, not all at once. But the door to the outside was now a window. The window was now solid brick. The apartment was reorganizing itself around me. Not randomly, not as a consequence of my deteriorating perception, but with intention, with design. The cage was being constructed one blink at a time, each micro-darkness used not just to advance the creature toward me, but to advance the walls toward each other. I was the variable being solved for. At the 60-hour mark, the hallucinations began. Or I thought they were hallucinations. I saw the creature in the periphery of my vision, even with my eyes fully open. Standing in the kitchen, its long, spindly fingers tracing the edge of my knives, cataloging the instruments of a life it was learning to inhabit. Sitting in my armchair with my posture, my specific way of sitting with one knee crossed as if rehearsing. I found a note on the coffee table. Not my handwriting. Not any handwriting I could read at normal resolution. Microscopic dots, arranged with terrible patience, that under a magnifying glass resolved into words. The light doesn't stop me, Mark. It just makes the shadows sharper. Look at your shadow. I looked down. My shadow on the floor wasn't matching my movement. I raised my arm. The shadow kept its arm down. Its hand, instead, was reaching upward toward the shadow of my throat. It wasn't just coming for me through my blinks. It was using everything, my light, my shadow, my own perception, as the medium of its approach. Every time I blinked, I gave it permission to exist. Every time I looked at anything, I gave it a map of my reality to reshape. I built the saline drip, a medical IV stand rigged with plastic tubing and surgical needles positioned just above the tear ducts, maintaining a constant film of moisture over the corneas. A nightmare of engineering conducted by a man who hadn't slept in 2.5 days. I looked like something assembled from a fever in a medical supply catalog. And then the power went out. Not a surge, not a grid failure. During a blink. One of the involuntary blinks my tape-pinned eyelids could no longer entirely prevent. It had reached the fuse box and severed the main line. The industrial lights died. The only light left was the pale filtered glow of the moon through unwashed windows. And in that dim gray light I saw it clearly for the first time. 7 feet tall. Limbs jointed wrong at the knees and elbows, the angles pointing in directions that joints are not designed for. No face. Still no face. But its chest. The torso of it, the thing that should have held lungs and ribs, was translucent. A pane of stretched gray tissue, and behind it, visible and unmistakable, a human heart, beating. My heart. Every time I felt the thud in my own chest, the specific frequency of my own specific heartbeat, the creature's chest pulsed with a violet light. We were synchronized. I hadn't been being watched. I hadn't been being stalked. I had been being replaced, one blink at a time, the darkness of my own eyelids, the manufacturing process by which the creature was assembling itself from the raw material of my existence. I was not the observer. I was the source. The saline ran out at hour 71. The last drop fell from the empty bag and landed on the lens of my eye, and the dryness hit me immediately, the world going from blurred to burning, the exhaustion rising like a physical tide. I stood in the center of the room with the flare gun in my hand, and I aimed it at the creature across the room from me, and I said the only thing I could think to say. "What do you want?" The creature didn't move, but the room spoke. Every floorboard, every wall, every piece of furniture groaning in a slow, layered, polyphonic chorus, the building itself forming the words from the vibrations of its own structure. "I want the 10th of a second. I want the darkness you don't use." I fired the flare. The room became magnesium white. 3 seconds with no shadows anywhere. The light total, the corners annihilated, the darkness driven out of every crevice and junction and seam in the apartment. The creature made a sound like metal grinding on bone, like a frequency no organic tissue should produce, and dissolved into gray ash that drifted to the floor and lay still. I fell to my knees. My eyes closed. For the first time in 72 hours, I stopped fighting the darkness. I slept for what felt like centuries. When I woke, the sun was through the window, the air was still, the world was quiet in the specific way of morning in a city just beginning to stir. My eyes felt clear. The burning was gone. I walked to the bathroom and looked in the mirror. My face was there, but it was wrong. Where my eyelids should have been, the skin was unbroken, smooth, continuous. No fold, no lash line, no lid. Just the same skin that covered the rest of my face, sealed over the sockets in which my eyes, my permanently open, permanently exposed, permanently watching eyes, now lived. I tried to scream. My mouth was gone. I turned around. I wasn't in the bathroom. I was on the mantel. Small, dense, made of dark, hand-carved wood, my smooth head tilted at the precise angle of something that has just heard a sound in the room behind it. A man was standing in the living room, tall, red hair, a cup of coffee in one hand, looking at me with the confused expression of someone who doesn't know yet what they've found. He walked over and picked me up and turned me in his hands. "Strange statue," he whispered. He put me back on the mantel and turned his back. I felt the tension in the room gather. I felt the other presences in the wood around me. The previous inhabitants of this form, the previous occupants of the 10th of a second, all the others who had stood where this man was standing and learned too late what I had learned too late. Waiting, patient, practiced. He raised his coffee cup. He drank. He blinked. I moved to the floor. He turned around, the coffee cup still raised, his eyes going from confused to wide to the specific expression of a man whose rational mind is performing its last desperate calculations before the animal intelligence takes over. He doesn't know the rule yet. But he will, because I'm not alone in here. And neither is he. Whatever you do, don't blink.